Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. He came home early, 40 minutes from nowhere, only to find bulldozers tearing through his desert fortress. No warning, no permit, just dust, destruction, and a forged signature. What began as a land dispute with a smug HOA president unraveled into a web of fraud, fire, and revenge. I was about 40 minutes out from home, somewhere between Casa Grande and the Florence Junction, when I first noticed the column of dust on the horizon. At first, I figured it was just some farmer tilling up desert soil, or one of those endless construction crews tearing into another empty stretch of Arizona nothing. It was a dry, angry wind that day, and dust devils danced all across the flat horizon like they were in heat. But this cloud of dust wasn't drifting, it was moving, fast, toward my property. I wasn't due back until the next morning. I'd driven out to see my brother in Tucson for a weekend, first real break in months, and left my place locked up tight, like I always do. My land sits on 2 acres of hard-packed desert, a little patch of freedom surrounded on one side by an HOA that thinks it's a miniature Vatican, Iron Sand Bluffs. The name alone makes me want to spit. I don't live under their thumb, never did, and made damn sure of that when I bought my parcel 5 years back. I built every inch of my home myself. Concrete foundation, double-thick insulation, custom steel frame. A fortress, or so I thought. As I turned off the highway and onto the dirt access road, my stomach dropped. The dust wasn't from some farmer or windstorm. It was coming from heavy machinery. I could see it now. Bright orange rental equipment chewing up the horizon like termites. A goddamn bulldozer. And behind it, an excavator and a work truck with yellow hazard strobes flashing like it was some kind of sanctioned job site. My pulse kicked up. That road dead-ended into my property. No one else had legal right-of-way. I gunned the engine. As I crested the last ridge before the slope into my backyard, I saw it, and I will never forget the way my heart stopped cold. There it was, the rear wall of my home, or what was left of it, crumbling under the weight of a goddamn bulldozer blade. One arm of the excavator had punched straight through my bedroom window, shards of tempered glass sparkling like rain in the hot sun. A man in a high-vis vest was shouting something over the roar of engines, waving to the driver to keep going. And the driver, some dumbass with a clipboard in the cab, was leaning out and laughing. I slammed on the brakes, dust washing over the hood. I was out of the truck before the engine cut off, Glock holstered at my side, badge chain swinging from my neck. Off-duty or not, I was still a cop. "Stop right there!" I bellowed. "Everybody freeze!" The machines choked off in staggered coughs. Workers turned, startled. One of them, a guy holding a crumpled folder, shouted back, "This area's condemned. You're not supposed to be here." I stalked forward, scanning faces, keeping my right hand close to my hip, but not drawing yet. This is my land. Who authorized this? A short, wiry man, must have been a foreman, stepped forward nervously, waving a sheaf of documents. We were told this was an unoccupied structure in a condemned zone. Permits were issued by Iron Sand Bluffs HOA. We're expanding the buffer zone. You're tearing down a private residence. I growled, snatching the papers. They were HOA forms, all right, stamped, signed, with what looked like city approval. Only I'd never received a single notice. You've got 30 seconds to explain how the hell this happened before I call in the entire goddamn county. A few of them started backing toward their trucks. That's when I saw her. Karen Jennings, president of the HOA. Bleach blonde, tailored khakis, holding an iPad like it was a damn royal decree. She was walking briskly toward me with a fake smile frozen on her face, like she'd just been caught jaywalking and was trying to charm her way out of it. "Officer Holt," she said, all sweetness and condescension. "You weren't supposed to be here until Monday. We assumed you'd already vacated." "Vacated?" I barked. "This is my home." Karen didn't blink. According to updated zoning maps and declarations filed last week, this land was reclassified as part of the Iron Sand Bluffs expansion corridor. Your house was listed as an incomplete, unoccupied structure. The demolition permit was processed through the city development department. I stared at her. No notification, no hearing, no due process. Oh, it was posted. Certified mail, electronic delivery, check your junk folders. She had the gall to smirk. My jaw clenched. "You forged something." Her smile twitched. "That's a very serious accusation." I turned, scanned the damage. The back wall of my house was half collapsed. The bulldozer had split the foundation near the support beams. My bedroom was exposed to the open air. The floor was cracked. My workbench was a pile of twisted steel. There were boot prints across my flag, the one I'd flown in Afghanistan. Karen clicked her tongue. "It's just property, Jared." That was when I knew this wasn't a mistake. This was a hit job. Deliberate, calculated. And she thought she could get away with it because I was just some rural cop with a house in the middle of the desert. I looked her dead in the eye. "You're done." I pulled my phone, hit speed dial. First call went to the county zoning office. The second, the sheriff. The third, a contact in the land commission. I wasn't waiting for this to play out on HOA terms. Karen's smile faltered. She turned, whispering urgently to one of the contractors. I walked back to my truck, holstered my Glock, and opened the glove box. Inside was every piece of documentation I'd ever filed. Deed, title, zoning exemptions, and the signed statement from the county when I bought the land. Not subject to HOA governance. Ever. This wasn't going to be another HOA expansion horror story. Not on my watch. The next morning, I drove straight to the county recorder's office, a folder of my original land documents riding shotgun like a silent witness. I hadn't slept. I'd spent half the night photographing the damage, logging the equipment IDs, and emailing a dozen officials. My house wasn't just damaged, it was assaulted, and I wasn't about to let it get buried under bureaucracy and fake smiles. I parked in front of the Development Services building in Florence, walked in like I owned the place, and asked to speak to whoever had signed off on the so-called demolition order. The clerk gave me a look like I was speaking Latin. "Sir, we don't process HOA expansions here. That's private governance." "No," I said flatly, placing the crumpled demo form on the counter. "This one's got the city seal on it. It says the reclassification was approved last Thursday by the Deputy Director of Planning." Her brows furrowed. She tapped a few keys, scanned the screen, then frowned. "There's nothing here matching this case number." "What about the parcel reassignment?" She tried again. "Nothing. And we definitely didn't issue any demolition permit for that property. Your land isn't even within the city's controlled zone. It's rural exempt." I leaned in, quiet. "Then someone forged your deputy director's signature." She went pale. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from the actual deputy director, a tired-looking man named Harris with sweat stains under his collar and 2 phones ringing on his desk. He took one look at the document and muttered, "Jesus Christ." "That your signature?" He shook his head. "That's a scanned stamp. We haven't used this header in over a year. And this isn't even our parcel number format. So someone submitted this under your name, used your seal, and passed it off as city authorization." He leaned back. "Looks that way." My fingers tapped the armrest. "I need a formal statement that no permit was ever issued, written, signed, and time-stamped." "I can do that." He printed, signed, and handed it over. I added it to the growing war file in my briefcase. Next stop, the HOA registry office at the county. I wanted to see what these bastards had filed. If they dared to submit a zoning reassignment or anything resembling a voluntary annexation, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. Sure enough, there it was. Filed 4 days ago. A document titled Declaration of Voluntary Annexation and Development Intent, signed by a company called Desert Renewal, Inc., purporting to represent my parcel, with my address, as being voluntarily added to Iron Sand Bluffs. HOA jurisdiction. The listed signatory, someone named Jonathan Keller. Never heard of him in my life. Underneath was a scribbled signature, not mine, and a notarized stamp that looked like it had been made in Microsoft Paint. I asked the clerk who filed it. She clicked, scrolled, then said, "It was dropped off in person by Karen Jennings, marked urgent." Who verified it? No one. It's pending review. But technically, it's in the system, which allowed the HOA to cite it as in process during permit application. I wanted to punch something. Pending review is a legal gray zone. It means a document exists in limbo, not accepted, not rejected, but just enough to be weaponized by a bad actor, and Karen Jennings was nothing if not a professional manipulator. I filed a formal objection to annexation on the spot, included a copy of my original title deed, and attached the deputy director's letter declaring the demo permit fraudulent. Then I requested a hold on any HOA-related filings connected to my property, pending a full investigation. The clerk's eyes widened as she read the materials. "Mr. Holt," she said, "do you want to file this as a criminal complaint as well?" I looked her in the eye. "I want to file it as whatever puts that HOA president in front of a judge." Later that day, I drove back to my house. The bulldozer was still there, half sunk into my basement slab like a broken mechanical mammoth. The contractor crew had vanished. Tire marks cut deep into the desert soil, gouging past my workshop. The foundation had split near the rear support. My tool shed was crushed. I did a rough mental tally. The damage was going to hit somewhere between $150,000 to $200,000. And that's before I got to the personal shit. My old service metals were covered in plaster dust. My mother's chest, the one I'd been restoring, splintered. And my bedroom, where I'd built the damn bed frame with my own hands, now looked like a construction war zone. That night, as I pored over the photos and paperwork at my kitchen table, what was left of it, I got a ping on my phone. No caller ID. One new voicemail. I played it. The voice was disguised. Male. Artificial. She paid $25,000 through a donor shell. Check the Foundation for Civic Progress. That's where the grease went. Look at March filings. Get a warrant. She buried it in a charity ledger. The line cut. I sat still for a moment, listening to the wind howl through the cracks in the bedroom wall. A scam. A payment. A fake charity? This wasn't just a rogue HOA drunk on power. This was starting to smell like a criminal enterprise. And I'd just ripped the cover off. By the time Monday rolled around, I was done playing defense. I'd spent the weekend cataloging every broken wall stud, every crack in the slab, every boot print on my floor. Insurance wouldn't touch it until the legal status was clear, and frankly, I didn't want them involved yet. This wasn't some act of nature. It was an act of sabotage. I'd already spoken to the sheriff's office, and they confirmed what I suspected. If I could prove the HOA acted on forged documents, we'd be talking felony territory, criminal trespass, destruction of private property, fraudulent representation, and possibly more if money had changed hands. And I was damn sure money had changed hands. With the anonymous voicemail still fresh in my mind, I went digging. Foundation for Civic Progress. Sounded like a classic laundry bin. I pulled up their nonprofit filings. Most of it was fluff. Local donations, public grant proposals, the usual tax shelter smoke. But buried in the Form 990 for March of this year was a single entry. Community Development Gift, $25,000. Anonymous donor, facilitated by Iron Sand Bluffs Homeowners Association. I smiled, cold and hard. There it was, hidden in plain sight. I brought this to the assistant DA and requested an investigative subpoena. I had enough. Fake annexation filings, forged permits, and now, what looked like a bribery attempt. They agreed. The warrant would take a few days, but in the meantime, I asked for something else, a search warrant for the HOA's main office. You want to go in yourself? The ADA asked, raising a brow. I'm not walking in there with a camera crew, I replied, but I know what to look for, and I know they're going to start shredding everything the minute they get wind of this. He nodded. We'll have a detective go with you. You're not doing this alone. That Friday, just before lunch, I walked into the HOA's office building with a court order in one hand and a sheriff's deputy at my side. Karen Jennings was already there, like she'd been tipped off. She stood behind the reception desk, arms folded, fake chipper, as always. This is a private association office, she started. I dropped the warrant on the counter. Not anymore. The look on her face as the deputy unlatched the door and we stepped inside, worth every shattered cinder block back at my house. The office was clean, suspiciously so, too clean. Desks were scrubbed bare, filing cabinets half empty, computers powered down, but they weren't fast enough. The deputy's tech specialist immediately cloned their main server hard drive. I went for the storage room, where I suspected the old records were kept. And jackpot, dusty banker boxes stacked floor to ceiling, all labeled by project name. One of them read, Redistricting Holt 2023. Inside, I found a printed schematic of my property overlaid with HOA expansion lines in red ink. Email printouts with subject lines like, Holt site, status. Just move forward. He's a beat cop. Won't have the resources. A draft letter never sent titled Notification of HOA Action, complete with fake mailing tracking numbers and forged USPS delivery confirmations. Internal messages between Karen and the HOA's legal rep. His title's clean, but no one cares. Just push it through. City's too disorganized to catch it. My blood boiled. They'd planned this down to the hour. They'd faked mail delivery, falsified jurisdiction lines, and gambled on my silence. All because I was, in their words, just a cop. I turned to Karen, who was now being questioned by the deputy. "We've had complaints," she was saying. "The community wanted it. He left the house vacant. We assumed." "Assumption doesn't bulldoze someone's goddamn home," I snapped. She didn't reply, just stared at the wall like she was trying to calculate how fast she could slither out of this. The last thing I pulled was a USB stick, jammed awkwardly into the back of the office printer. Rookie mistake. Back home, I plugged it into a secure laptop. It contained a full backup of internal HOA communications from the past 2 years, likely automated. Buried in a folder titled Old Exec Correspondence was a long PDF chain of internal chat logs. Keywords like Phase 2, remove fence line before permit review, demolish quietly before he gets back. Easier to ask forgiveness than permission. Secure the bulldozer for the 13th. And finally, from Karen herself, he's just a local guy. Military background, sure, but no one listens to desert people. We'll buy him out after the wall's down. I closed the laptop, poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey, and stared at the ruins of my home. No, Karen, you're not buying me out. You're getting bought and sold in court. By Monday morning, the ruins of my back wall were still open to the desert, and I was still finding chunks of insulation half buried in the dirt. But now I had something more valuable than drywall or concrete. I had evidence. With the hard drive clone, the USB archive, and the fake annexation documents in hand, I filed a full criminal complaint with the county prosecutor's office. The assistant DA, a sharp young woman named Colleen Reiser, didn't need much convincing. She took one look at the forged USPS receipts and muttered, "They're cooked." "Every signature," I said, pointing to the HOA filings. "Every stamped approval, all of it. Fabricated. And the demolition equipment. Rented in HOA's name. They paid cash. I've got the rental invoice." That afternoon, I sat down with my lawyer, James Alder, a straight-shooting litigator who looked like a rancher and argued like a cobra. We'd worked cases together back when I was on rotation with county narcotics. Now he was my personal blade. "We're filing civil and criminal," he said. "Fraud, trespass, destruction of private property, attempted theft by annexation. And we're going after personal liability." "Jennings, too." He nodded. "Especially Jennings. She's the one pushing this like a land grab. I want her under oath." We filed 2 suits, one criminal, one civil. Alder attached the full exhibit folder, including the schematics showing their expansion plans crossing my property line, the fake annexation forms, the charity money trail, and the internal HOA messages talking about pushing it through while the cop is gone. I gave a sworn statement. So did the deputy who accompanied me to the search. The whole case started rolling fast. Too fast for Iron Sand Bluffs to cover their tracks. They tried, though. Oh, they tried. The next day, HOA filed a countercomplaint, accusing me of escalatory behavior, brandishing a firearm on HOA representatives, and public defamation of a certified residential development board. I nearly laughed. I hadn't even drawn my sidearm. My truck dash cam footage showed everything, including me yelling for the machines to stop while holding my phone, not a gun. Still, they sent a PR packet to the local press. Some watered-down press release filled with dog whistle phrases like dangerous escalation, volatile landowner, and isolated incident during expansion. Karen's photo was front and center, chin tilted like she was the damn patron saint of suburban. Order. They thought I'd back down if they spun it, so I beat them to the punch. I contacted an old friend of mine who worked freelance for a statewide podcast that covered abuse of power and local government failures. I handed over the emails, the forged annexation paperwork, and the Foundation for Civic Progress donation trail. He ran a piece within 72 hours. The HOA that tried to bulldoze a cop's home. It went viral. Local news picked it up. Then regional. I stopped being the guy with the hole in his house and started being the guy who caught HOA fraud red-handed. My inbox exploded. Dozens of other homeowners wrote me, people who'd lived under HOA boot heels for years. One woman had her solar panels ripped out because they weren't approved. Another had her car towed because her bumper sticker was offensive to community standards. It was like a floodgate had opened. The pressure cooked fast. The prosecutor called to say they were elevating the case to a felony investigation. The court issued a temporary injunction against Iron Sand Bluffs, halting all demolition or expansion activity, effective immediately. Karen tried to pivot. She went on the local morning show draped in a flag scarf, all community values and upholding neighborhood harmony. She even referred to my house as a temporary dwelling under extended construction, as if I was living in a treehouse. So I showed up that same night on another channel with footage of my service in Afghanistan, shots of me building my home from scratch, and dash cam audio of her crew laughing while they ripped through my wall. Then I said, looking straight into the camera, "This is what HOA abuse looks like. It looks like corruption disguised as order. And if it can happen to me, a cop, a veteran, a homeowner on fully private land, then it can damn sure happen to anyone." That was the moment people started paying attention, not just locals. The county board called an emergency hearing. Some HOA members, previously loyal, started distancing themselves from Karen. One even emailed me privately saying, "I didn't vote for any of this. She never told us the land wasn't part of our charter." I sent it straight to the DA. That same week, I got confirmation that the Foundation for Civic Progress had quietly purged Karen's donation from their website. No statement, just gone. They knew. Everyone knew. But the best part? We weren't even at trial yet. They say pressure bursts pipes, but where I'm from, it also smokes out cowards. And something told me Karen Jennings and her HOA cult were starting to sweat. I kept my Glock on my nightstand now. Old habit from the Army. But it wasn't paranoia this time, just pattern recognition. People like Karen didn't go down without trying to sink their teeth in one last time. The first hit came on a Tuesday. I was returning from the courthouse where Alder and I had just filed a discovery motion for full HOA internal correspondence when I noticed something off near my back fence line. The air smelled like burnt plastic, sharp and unnatural, like a fire pit gone wrong. Sure enough, behind the garage there was a blackened patch of dirt. Not big, maybe 6 feet across, but the brush was scorched, and one of the supports for my solar array had melted slightly. It hadn't spread far thanks to the rock perimeter I'd installed years ago, but it had clearly been set intentionally. Accelerant was involved. I called it in. The fire marshal confirmed what I already suspected. It wasn't spontaneous. No lightning, no electrical fault, no misplaced grill. Someone had poured fuel and walked away, probably expecting the wind to finish the job. They didn't count on the gravel barrier or my surveillance system. 2 of my perimeter trail cams had picked up movement, a figure in dark clothing moving low, carrying something metal, possibly a gas can. Unfortunately, the person kept their head down, no facial ID, but the frame showed enough to confirm it wasn't a transient or teenager being dumb. This was targeted. Later that night, I found a fresh scratch mark on my front door lock, as if someone had tried to jimmy it, clumsily or as a warning. It didn't scare me. It pissed me off. I had a fortress, reinforced doors, floodlights, drones. I wasn't afraid, but I was furious. This wasn't just fraud or corruption anymore. This was a damn escalation. Karen was losing control of her narrative, and someone in her circle had decided to try and scare me silent. The next morning, I filed a formal criminal complaint about the attempted arson. The sheriff's deputy I worked with took it personally. He used to be HOA president in another county and had his own horror stories. "You want to push this to state investigators?" he asked. "Let's go all the way," I said. "If they're trying to torch me out of my own house, I'm not treating this like trespass. This is coordinated." He nodded grimly. "You've stirred a hornet's nest." "Good. Let it sting." I called Alder. "We're filing for emergency injunctive control over the HOA office," I told him. "They're already shredding things. I want that building locked down and under court custody before they erase every damn record." "I'll draft it," he said without pause. "I'll go through a judge I know in Pinole Superior. He hates HOA cases. Perfect guy." We filed within 24 hours a motion for temporary possession of organizational assets for the purpose of preserving legal evidence in an active criminal and civil investigation. The judge approved it faster than I expected. 2 days later, I was back at the HOA building, this time with a full warrant, 2 sheriff's deputies, a county evidence custodian, and a locksmith. Karen was already there. She'd posted herself in front of the entrance like a statue of suburban delusion, arms folded, eyes full of fire. "You can't do this," she barked as we approached. "This is private property. Association headquarters." "Not anymore," the deputy said, holding up the order. "Effective immediately. All operations cease. Facility is now under legal preservation, hold pending criminal proceedings." Karen went pale. "You can't be serious. This is an overreach." I stepped forward, looked her dead in the eye. "You want to talk overreach? Try bulldozing a man's home and then lighting his yard on fire." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The locksmith got the door open in under a minute. The evidence custodian moved in with sealed bins, computers, file boxes, flash drives. Even the damn office coffee machine was tagged. The icing on the cake. We sealed the building with official tape that read, "Under investigation, do not enter." That evening, I sat in my truck across from the office, watching as a few of Karen's cronies showed up and saw the sign. The look on their faces. Just the beginning. They'd tried to scare me. Now it was their turn. The next few weeks were a blur of subpoenas, interviews, and meetings in rooms that smelled like stale coffee and burnt toner. But something had shifted. The case wasn't mine anymore. Now it had momentum, official, institutional, public. And the deeper it went, the uglier it got. The county prosecutor's office began issuing subpoenas like candy. HOA board members were summoned one by one to testify under oath. A few tried to stonewall. One even claimed a medical leave of absence the day before deposition, but the paper trail we'd built didn't lie. Bank transfers, fake notarizations, internal memos with time-stamped edits. Every corner we turned exposed another layer of fraud. They'd forged not just city signatures, they'd backdated permits, faked delivery receipts, and tried to pressure low-level city clerks into fast-tracking their expansion agenda. And in the center of it all, Karen Jennings. She'd been the architect, the one who signed the ghost annexation forms, who met with the fake LLC reps, who personally delivered the documents to the county with a note marked urgent, expedited per verbal city approval, which of course was total fiction. The prosecutor called her in for a voluntary statement. She refused, so they charged her. First count, felony fraud. Second, criminal trespass. Third, destruction of private property. Fourth, attempted unlawful seizure of land by misrepresentation. She was arrested in the parking lot of a wine bar outside Maricopa, wearing sunglasses and carrying a gym bag. When the mugshot hit the news, it exploded. This wasn't just a local scandal anymore. State media picked it up. Suburban war zone, one outlet called it. The HOA that went too far. I watched the coverage while eating cold Chinese food in my half-gutted living room, surrounded by the skeleton of a home I used to recognize. But I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet, because I knew what was still at stake. The other board members. And my land. Karen's arrest triggered panic in the HOA ranks. 2 board members resigned within 48 hours. One filed a statement claiming he'd acted under duress. Another tried to shift blame onto the HOA's legal counsel, a man named Voss, who promptly vanished from his Phoenix office and left the state. Alder filed a motion to freeze the HOA's assets. Their defense team tried to object, claiming the organization needed operating funds. We responded with a 3-inch thick brief titled Operating Funds Used for Criminal Activity. The judge read it, sighed audibly, and approved the freeze. At the same time, we began settlement talks, or rather, they did. Their newly appointed interim board sent a letter offering amicable resolution options, which included a rebuild of my home and a modest 6-figure compensation for temporary hardship. I sent back one sentence: "You can't rebuild integrity." The civil case was headed for trial, but the criminal case was burning like a wildfire. Then came the final blow. A sealed affidavit was unsealed. A city employee had come forward under whistleblower protection. They claimed Karen had approached them personally, offering charitable donations to their department's Neighborhood Resilience Fund in exchange for paperwork flexibility regarding unincorporated parcels. The amount, $25,000, same as the foundation gift, same as the time-stamped entry we'd uncovered weeks before. That was the nail. The judge approved a RICO enhancement, treating the HOA's actions not just as isolated fraud, but as an organized effort to illegally seize land and convert it into profit. That changed everything. We weren't just dealing with HOA mismanagement anymore. This was racketeering, a criminal enterprise. I remember standing outside the courthouse, watching the press swarm around Karen as she was escorted inside in cuffs again, this time without the designer sunglasses. She didn't look at me, but her lawyer did. And the way he avoided my eyes told me everything I needed to know. They were done, but I wasn't, because it wasn't just about punishment anymore. It was about setting a precedent. Courtroom 3 of the Pinal County Superior Court wasn't built for drama. Low ceilings, buzzing fluorescent lights, and a jury box that looked like it was designed by IKEA on a deadline. But that morning, it felt like a stage. The gallery was packed. Homeowners, reporters, HOA critics, even a couple of county commissioners. I spotted at least one camera crew outside filming the courthouse sign like it was the final scene of a documentary. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Alder beside me, tie slightly crooked, sleeves rolled up. Across from us, the remains of iron sand bluffs, a fractured legal team, a substitute board president, and a visibly exhausted public relations consultant scribbling into a notepad, like her life depended on it. Karen Jennings wasn't present. She was still in holding, awaiting sentencing in the criminal case, but her fingerprints were on every page of what came next. The judge opened with a sigh, the kind only someone with decades on the bench could master. Then he turned to Alder. "Mr. Alder, you may proceed." Alder didn't grandstand. He didn't pace or shout. He just laid it out. Calm, brutal, undeniable. Exhibit A. The forged annexation documents with side-by-side signature analysis from a handwriting expert. Exhibit B. The demo permit with an outdated header format and a fake seal. Exhibit C. Emails and messages referencing my home as a soft target for preemptive expansion. Exhibit D. The charitable donation disguised as a bribe, backed by banking records and a whistleblower's sworn testimony. Exhibit E. The drone footage, the dash cam recordings, and my live testimony recounting the day I pulled into my driveway and saw my house being eaten alive by a bulldozer. The defense tried to object. Procedural nitpicking, claims of imperfect information, and overzealous community enforcement. But it didn't matter. The judge saw it for what it was. Organized abuse of power, fraud, trespass, conspiracy. When I took the stand, I kept it simple. I built that house with my own hands. I said, I poured the foundation, wired the panels, welded the gate, and they tried to erase it because a spreadsheet told them they could. I looked at the jury. No notice, no call, just steel blades and engine oil and a fake letter taped to a pole. It was quiet for a long second. Then Alder nodded and I stepped down. Closing arguments came and went. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours. They came back unanimous. Liability proven, damages awarded. HOA Iron Sand Bluffs was ordered to pay $2.4 million in compensatory and punitive damages, not just for the cost of repairs, but for emotional distress, legal fees, and malicious intent. The judge also issued an unprecedented ruling. The HOA was to be dissolved as a legal entity. Its assets, real estate, office equipment, accounts were to be liquidated and placed in a trust for compensation distribution and public restitution. Karen Jennings. She was sentenced the following week. 12 years in state prison without parole for racketeering, fraud, and malicious destruction of property. 2 other board members got 8 and 7 years, respectively. When the gavel fell, I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just exhaled. Alder slapped the table lightly. "That's how you burn the playbook," he muttered. The PR consultant on the other side dropped her pen. We walked out into the sun. Outside, reporters shoved microphones at me. I gave one statement. This wasn't just about my house. It was about showing that no one, not even a self-appointed neighborhood king, is above the law. That night, as I stood on the foundation of my wrecked living room, listening to the quiet creak of desert wind, I knew the story wasn't over. But the battle was, and I'd won. 6 months later, I stood at the edge of my land, holding a mug of burned coffee and watching as the last section of the new concrete wall settled into place. 12 feet high, reinforced, angled inward to deflect climbing, topped with motion sensors, floodlights, and a no trespassing sign the size of a mattress. But the real centerpiece wasn't the wall. It was the sign right in front of it, staked deep into the red Arizona soil, surrounded by steel poles and solar spotlights that lit it up like a billboard every night. Police training zone, no HOA, no forgiveness. It wasn't just decoration. Next to the rebuilt house, stronger, smarter, better designed, I'd poured a full-scale training yard, shoot house, obstacle course, vehicle approach track. The kind of place rural departments could use without waiting on state approval or paying $6,000 a weekend to a private facility. I called it Holt Field. It wasn't a vengeance project. It was a statement. I didn't rebuild just to move on. I rebuilt to take root, harder than before. With the settlement money, I'd restored my home, doubled the defensive perimeter, and bankrolled a legal startup for landowners facing HOA abuse. Alder and I called it Free Ground Legal Initiative. We offered pro bono consultation for homeowners stuck in HOA conflicts across the Southwest. Emails poured in. People wanted advice, support, someone to fight back, and we gave them tools to do it. Then came the hearing before the State Committee on Private Governance. They asked me to testify. I told them everything: the forged documents, the bribes, the bulldozers, the fire, the silence. After my statement, they drafted the first version of the Arizona HOA Accountability Act, a law requiring full transparency of all HOA filings, pre-approval of demolition permits on any parcel not explicitly under HOA authority, mandatory, third-party verification for annexation filings, criminal liability for board members acting outside charter boundaries. It passed with bipartisan support. I became the face of it, not by choice, but I didn't fight it either. Sometimes it takes a hole in your house to open one in the system. Karen Jennings, still in Perryville prison last I checked. Someone told me she teaches business ethics now. Go figure. The land where the HOA office once stood? Auctioned, bought by a couple who turned it into a veteran-owned gun shop and outdoor gear supply. Fitting. People still stop by my gate sometimes, ask for a photo with the sign. Ask me if the story was real. I always tell them the same thing. Every inch of this land has been tested, and it held. Sometimes I still wake up thinking I hear the rumble of a bulldozer outside, but it's not fear anymore. It's memory, and it keeps me sharp.